Back, and it's time to talk through pass catchers available in free agency. We've got wide receivers, we've got tight ends. Wide receivers available in free agency, like kind of two different crops to talk through here. Number one, it's like the real wide receivers available in free agency, which this list is going to get smaller, especially with the first name that we have here, George Pickens. The Cowboys already said they're going to tag him. Alec Pierce potentially making it to the open market, although I do wonder if the Colts franchise tag him. Rashid Shaheed, Wan'Dale Robinson, Romeo Dobbs. The reason I say those guys are like real wide receivers, not in the sense of like not a Mickey Mouse wide receiver. It's more just like these guys are kind of in the primes of their careers, whereas we have the vet wide receivers, the Juwan Jennings, Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans, Deebo Samuel, Christian Kirk, Jori's favorite player, Keenan Allen. And then there's a bunch of trade targets too. DJ Moore, A.J. Brown. The Eagles did kind of a little bit mixed message from Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman. I'm sure you noticed that. Jori, Brandon Ayuk, and probably not Justin Jefferson, but the producers made me put that on the graphics so that we can get that thing tweeted out. All right, that's a lot of names there. But let's start with the real wide receivers available in free agency. Jori, of course, I'm sure you've got a lot of notes on George Pickens, who is going to be tagged by the Cowboys. Will he stay with the Cowboys?
Yeah, so the Cowboys, and specifically Executive Vice President Stephen Jones, did say on Monday from the Combine that they are leaning towards tagging George Pickens, and of course they'll have to get that done very soon. The tag is a placeholder. We know that. Yes, it can be something that continues, but really in July, it's like you're playing on the tag. In March, it's, hey, now we have your rights and we'll decide whether we negotiate it. To me, what's interesting about George Pickens is I would feel totally different about the Cowboys' negotiations with George Pickens 1 year ago, because I watched with Dak, with Zeke, with CeeDee, all of these players for the Cowboys who would kind of take this out. Some of them would have holdouts, but they always got the money at the end. The Micah Parsons trade totally should change our perspective on the likelihood of George Pickens. I'm not saying he won't be back with the Cowboys. I think he will, and I actually think the tag is the best option for him because this is a guy who has off-field question marks.
Yeah.
He didn't fit well in Pittsburgh toward the end, and it's been 1 year in Dallas, and not a perfect year, even though he was definitely super efficient and effective on the field, we know. And so I think that that's actually a good use for it. But I think that if I were George Pickens and I'm saying I'm not playing on the tag, I would have more pause with that now after the Cowboys said, okay, Micah, you don't want to do what we do? Great, go to Green Bay.
And same agent there
Yeah,
as well.
same agent. And this is because also not every team wants George Pickens. I get that the talent is there. I understand the fantasy implications. But there are teams who took him off their board, or at least top of their board in the draft process, and he has not disproven some of those theories in the league.
Totally.
I've been a huge George Pickens fan since he arrived on the NFL scene. I love that volatile personality that he has, and yet I keep coming back to the idea. We don't want to go too far talking about like narratives.
Of course.
If he's on the franchise tag, I don't know that ends well, right?
Yeah.
Like with the personality that he has, and we saw, you mentioned it last year, there were times where there's effort concerns. Like he just is that kind of player. And if he doesn't get that long-term contract that he deserves, let's face it, he had a great year. He does deserve a long-term deal. He should get it. If he's on that franchise tag, I think it could go downhill after what was a phenomenal season, even though he tailed off a little bit at the end. But, I mean, let's face it, the Cowboys tailed off a little bit at the end.
Yeah.
I was off for a few weeks. I got to get a dig in there to producer Colin, right? We got to get one Cowboy shot in there. But, yeah, let's hope that Pickens can be happy and have another great year, because what we saw last year is a guy that can be like that T. Higgins type player, that, second wide receiver one for fantasy on the same team.
And you're right. Not every team is going to want to marry George Pickens. Some players, it's like you hear this like, oh, this guy you want to date, not marry, right? Like there's definitely some teams you don't want to do that with necessarily. But Dallas, I do feel like, is one of those teams where he can stick long term and it can work. And one of the biggest reasons why is like I've heard some people say like, oh, maybe CeeDee Lamb wasn't happy with him. Like I talked to CeeDee at the Super Bowl and he loved having George Pickens there, and he was super supportive of him and everything. And like he wants him back, long term. That dynamic I think is really important. Like when you have a established paid wide receiver one that he's cool with the other guy being there, and they really unlock a lot in each other too, because George is like, you just stick him out at X receiver. He took the fewest snaps in the slot percentage-wise among relevant starting wide receivers last year, and just like that's a pretty unique role to be able to do that and then move CeeDee Lamb around. I think it just makes all the sense in the world from a football perspective, and I think from a personality perspective too. Like, this is a team that can handle that, is okay with the headlines, is okay with the attention, as we know. So I'm certainly, as a George Pickens supporter, like wanting him to stay here. I don't think the grass is greener on the other side.
Yeah, I think from a CeeDee Lamb standpoint, on the field, I agree. Like CeeDee and George and the targets they share, I think that actually works really well. They do play off each other. And I also think having quarterback Dak Prescott there does allow you to take a little bit more of a risk because you have an established leader at quarterback. They didn't have that in Pittsburgh when he was in Pittsburgh, and Dak knows how to manage all the personalities and kind of push the right buttons for each person. That said, okay, we're talking about George making way less than CeeDee and CeeDee getting the $34 million. If George makes more than CeeDee, does CeeDee feel the same? I think that, or even if he makes $30 million a year and CeeDee's making 34, I think what I would want to know is, when George Pickens missed curfew in Vegas and he was held out a series or a series and a half kind of for that, CeeDee Lamb missed it with him. And CeeDee didn't have those issues previously. So my concern is not like, is George going to be volatile? Is he going to bring CeeDee down with him?
It's a fair point.
Look, missing curfew in Vegas, it's not the worst thing someone can do. Right. I'm not saying that is the be-all, end-all. But if he brings other guys with him, that to me is the bigger concern than whether he's always at meetings on time.
I think what the conclusion there is that this is not the end of the story. Like, we'll continue to monitor this one through the course of the offseason. Alec Pierce is another guy that I think could potentially be franchise tagged. But, man, he's another one that, like, again, I don't know if the grass is greener on the other side. Like, he's a guy that I think if he gets to free agency, we're going to talk about him making like $30 million a year. And I just don't, number one, think he's a $30 million wide receiver. I think he's a really good player in his specific role. And I think for a player like that, I don't want to see him go elsewhere. That's no shade to Alec Pierce. I like Alec Pierce. I've been on record as an Alec Pierce fan. But again, it's managing expectations. And if he goes to another team, again, it's one of these teams like Tennessee that has just more cap space than they could possibly know what to do with. And it's Brian Daboll, and it's a pretty different style of offense than what Shane Steichen ran last year. I would just actually get nervous, Boone, about like, okay, people are going to say, follow the money. They paid him like a one. They're going to throw to him like a number one. And he's a good player, but maybe not a player of that skill set to handle that level of volume.
Yeah, I totally agree. A very good real-life player, a guy that I didn't give enough credit to. We were talking about him last night, that I think because of my A.D. Mitchell love, I kind of just kept pushing Pierce to the side, going, get out of the way, let Mitchell get his opportunity. And we saw last year, Pierce had a fantastic season. But I totally agree. I don't think he profiles as a number one, and he's about to get paid as a number one.
Yeah.
So, but I want to know, if we don't know about Daniel Jones' health, if you're Alec Pierce, does that influence your decision?
I think it might. Well, here's the deal. Like, if he gets to the open market, he's going to take the biggest deal. I think that, and maybe that comes from Indianapolis. Maybe it doesn't. That's the thing there, because I think you'd be willing to walk into the unknown of like Cam Ward, and you've never played with him, and is he good? Obviously, taken first overall last year, I think he had a lot of flashes. You know, people who watch him closely on tape, like Nate Tice, think he's got all that potential still in him, but he's an unknown. I think is what you'd have to say. You're going to take the money and run with it there. And that would be my opinion. Other free agent wide receivers, any other guys stand out to you in the real group, Boone, that you're interested in seeing where they go, whether Rashid Shaheed, Wan'Dale Robinson, Romeo Doubs?
I like Wan'Dale Robinson, and I know you've referred to him as, the PPR scam lovingly, or maybe not so lovingly over the years.
It's not lovingly. By the way, another guy that previous to this year, 100% a Mickey Mouse receiver, like 4.7 air yards per target.
I'm really getting a great understanding of like language of origin, use it in a sentence.
We'll have a full breakdown on this later. Don't worry about it.
But Robinson last year, wide receiver 21 in fantasy points per game. And I know there was still an element of the PPR scam going on where it was, 92
he grew
receptions.
His game, though.
Yeah, just over 1,000 yards. So those numbers, efficient, but not the biggest when you're catching that many passes. And still, though, last year he did show us a little something more, some more downfield shots. He had 3 games over 100 yards. I think he's a guy that if he gets in the right environment, he leaves there. I'm kind of interested in what he could potentially be somewhere else.
I've sent a lot of team players to the Titans here so far, but again, they're another.
He makes a lot of sense.
Quarterbacks go to the Vikings.
He makes a lot of sense.
Pretty much. Well, listen, they need him. I watched those receivers last year. Not a lot of great stuff going on. I'm not saying he's necessarily the perfect type of what they need, but for connection with Brian Daboll, like it is he'll give him a reliable like downfield presence because he played more outside and actually, like I said, not Mickey Mouse routes last year for Wan'Dale Robinson. So certainly that would be a spot that could potentially make a lot of sense.
And we're not talking talking about him as like a league-winning type
Oh,
player,
yeah.
but a value, a guy that could be a value, could be a solid wide receiver 3 in your fantasy lineup, something like that.
When we talk about the receivers, Jori, who are potentially available on the trade market, I mentioned DJ Moore, I mentioned A.J. Brown, and Brandon Ayuk. I don't know if he will be traded or released, but he's definitely not on the Niners next year. He's probably going to be on the Washington Commanders, let's be real. Any of those guys stand out as potential, like, okay, I definitely see this happening?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, I'm not sure Brandon Ayuk is going to play this year.
I also am not sure either.
I hope he can. I hope for his sake he can, but I think there are real mental health conversations to be had, and I think that
fair.
I don't think this is just like he got mad at the Niners and that was it. There's some serious stuff going on there, and so you got to see if he's playing at all, and that to me is a question before it's where he's going to play. And also, if he is going to play, as I think we've seen across the league, you need to have resources in place, and we saw that with Rondale Moore and his loss this week. It's just there's a lot that these guys are battling, particularly when they're rehabbing from injury. A.J. Brown's a funny one because Philly is funny, and yet they kind of have, you got like Howie Roseman, their general manager, Nick Sirianni, head coach, and it's like, we're not going to guarantee he's coming back, but also you don't want to let good players go, because how do you win if it's hard to find good players? And if you have a good player and we think A.J. wants to be here, I think they figure it out. I think it's always going to be volatile, but I'm not sure. I actually think that AJ would probably have a better year somewhere else. I love the connection of him going back to the Mike Vrabel world and going to New England.
Sure.
I don't know that they're going to go after him, but I think you're going to have to give Howie Roseman a lot of money to convince him of that, because I don't think that AJ is necessarily the problem, even if he's spoken up about the problems. And so I think it's hard. Also, AJ still has like the degenerative knee condition. Like he's not a purely clean prospect physically, even though he's very effective. And I think that he has benefited from having Devonta Smith on the field.
As somebody who effectively did change teams last year myself in the summer, I will say I would like to see DJ Moore and A.J. Brown both go somewhere else. I think they need that. They need a little bit of a fresh start. You have that new feeling where you're trying to prove yourself to everybody around you. I will say I came in, I had to show Harmon what I had, right? I think those guys kind of need that.
I was going to say,
you did great.
He's not calling me Mickey Mouse, so
right.
yeah, we have that.
Not a Mickey Mouse fantasy analyst. You had the DJ Moore 2023 season when you went to the Bears and had 1,300 yards his first season there. We'll see if you can continue to up that pace. DJ did not, so we'll see, Boone.
But we've seen recently, last year, these guys still do have something left in the tank, and I think if you get them in a new environment, that would be the thing that could light the fire under them and get the most out of them here in the next year or two.
Yeah, with DJ Moore, I think also that it's not that valuable to be a great receiver in Chicago. Maybe that sounds like silly, but I just think the way they use their tight ends, the way they use their running game, like no one had over 750 yards last year, and even the only one to get over 700 receiving yards was close to the level. Yeah,
they were all literally, the three of them. They're like
700.
They're right stuck. If you sort wide receivers by yards, the three of them, Odunze, DJ Moore, Luther Burden, are right in order league wide. Now, obviously, Odunze was hurt; he missed time, but at the same time, I do think it's going to always be that way. And you're paying DJ $28 million. He's the highest paid player on the team. Like that just doesn't make any sense. I'd be shocked if he's back. He's the one that between him and AJ Brown. AJ, I could kind of go either way. DJ, I do think will be on the move. I've thrown out Buffalo as a potential landing spot because he played with Joe Brady in Carolina, knows the offense. Talked with him about that actually.
I like that.
At Super Bowl, so people can go find that interview there. Let's talk tight ends here before we get out. We've got Kyle Pitts, we've got Dallas Goedert, we've got Isaiah Likely, and we've got Cade Otton. Kyle Pitts, though, franchise tagged by the Atlanta Falcons. That was announced earlier this week, Jori. Yeah,
and I really am excited about what Kevin Stefanski can do with him. I just want to see like a new coaching staff, a new playbook, how he's going to function, because he was really productive last year, that 928 5 touchdowns. And, I mean, they're smart to keep him there, and the tight end tag is not so expensive.
You rattled most of the names off there. David Njoku's another one. Like, it is a shockingly deep free agent tight end class this year. I'm pretty excited. These are all names that have been fantasy starters over the last couple of years at different times, that if they get in the right spot, we're going to be drafting them fairly high, and we're going to be starting them again this year. So it's a one we're going to have to watch for landing spots, though, before we can get too excited about these guys. But everyone you just mentioned has a shot to be a fantasy value this year and to be in our lineups.
Yeah, even David Njoku, I wonder if he actually goes to Atlanta. You know, former coaches there, and they want to run a lot of 12 personnel, even if they are retaining Kyle Pitts. He's more in that, you know, I always think this is stupid, like the Harold Fannin role. Like, that's not what he's going to do in the offense, but he is of that same ilk as a tight end and more of a movement player. I do wonder, just really quickly, like, let's say that happens. They get David Njoku, Kyle Pitts is this move-around tight end type. Drake London's role, what does that look like in the offense? They also have like zero receiver depth after him. So Atlanta's just a bizarre team. We also don't know what they're doing at quarterback. They've told us for the third month in a row, like, we're releasing Kirk Cousins. We know you're releasing Kirk Cousins. So it will be interesting to track that entire Atlanta Falcons situation.